Some say on Halloween night, if you go past 7 black gates, you will see the 7 gates of hell. I thought it was a myth at first until I tried it out. I went past 7 black gates around my neighborhood. Then when I went to sleep, my dreams were filled with furious fire. Then it stopped. There was a tall man, tall and bulky. His eyes were rather squinted, which shows he's old. His legs and hands were thin and looked like they could barely support his own weight. He spoke. He spoke with a scratchy and dying tone. He said, "Imokla nevis e." He chuckled and opened the gate. My whole body became numb, moving on its own. I could not fight it. Struggling did not work. I gave up trying to fight it, and struggling, without control, I went past the first gate. I saw fire showing. The corpses were horribly mutilated, desecrated, and burnt. They were sobbing so loudly that I couldn't even hear the crackles on the fire. One came to me. With one eye and bullet holes all over him, he said, "We are the desecrated corpses who did not get a proper burial. We are to stay here till Judgment Day." I went past him into the second gate. It was in a building. At gate 2, I was in a dungeon. There were people tied up, screaming in pain. One was being sawed in half very slowly, and his body kept healing, ready to be sawn again. There was an iron maiden with the door being closed and open, and the body looked as normal as ever. A man in an executioner's mask said to me, "We are the tortured by our own devices." I went past him to the exit. I walked to the third gate. This time, I was in a forest. This time, it was silent except for a few yells. There was a man being hung from a noose. Another one fell from a cliff, repaired and fell off again. I was running away. I was running away from what I saw, a horribly burnt woman chasing after me. I already knew what this one was. There were people who committed suicide. I ran into the fourth gate. It was a palace. I was in there. I saw emperors, politicians, and really wealthy people. An emperor was being gnawed on by lions. When the lion ripped a limb out and slashed him, the part grew back. A politician was being beaten by what looked like shadows in prisoner's clothing. A man in a suitcase came to me and said we were the corrupted people, the people who used our power to help ourselves, not the others. I walked to the next gate, the fifth gate. I was in another room. There was a man tied up on a bed, being lashed by floating spiked leather whips. A woman was being burnt by a lighter, but her screams and cries were muffled by a cloth that was used to gag her. A rather large man came up to me and said we are the rapists and the sex offenders paying for our crimes on earth. I ran to the sixth gate. I was in a room again. I saw a man and a woman being stabbed, their wounds healing almost immediately. Another person was being buried alive, and another being hit and jabbed with floating metal bars. I knew who these people were. They were the people who murdered, being harmed, the way that they killed their victims. The exit was the seventh gate, the final one. This nightmare was almost over, and I was excited. I was outside. There was a man wearing a shroud over his head, coated with explosives. He blew up and regenerated, and blew up again. Another one was being beaten, stabbed by sharp metal objects, and burnt by torches, lighters, and matches. They were held by people who looked like shadows. One of them came up to me and said, "They were the mass murderers, the terrorists, the suicide bombers. I am a shadow of one of his victims, beating him and taking revenge for killing us on Earth." I ran to the exit. When I woke up in the morning, I was horribly scarred. The images of what I had ran into in my head, in fact, was all I was thinking about the whole year. it became Halloween again. I didn't care to go outside that night. I just went to bed. It took me a while to sleep. When I did, I was in the front of the first gate of hell. There was a teenager like me. He was staring at me. He was in shock to see me. My body then became numb. I could not control myself again. I said to him in a scratchy, dying tone, "Imokla oet nevis eo." I chuckled and opened the gate for him. After he went inside with an expression that looked like he was fighting something and struggling. I looked at myself on a goblet filled with what looked like blood. I saw the gatekeeper. I became the gatekeeper. In fact, I am.